Ned bowed his head. It is indeed, but if we refuse, war is assured. A deep hush fell. Finally, Robert cursed, rose from the throne, and paced. His mailed boots clacked against the stone floor. The messenger stood rigid, dread plain on his features. Robert turned back to him. Tell your master I'll not allow him to treat the crown like a puppet. Lord Stark is my man, and if Tywin wants to see him, he can travel to King's Landing and kneel before us. The messenger paled. Why, your grace, my instructions are only to deliver. Cersei cut in smoothly. But perhaps Lord Stark himself might weigh the cost of refusing. So many lives hang in the balance. All for a moment's kneeling. Robert scowled at her, but his gaze flicked uncertainly to Ned. Ned, I cannot force you to do this. I won't force you. It's a vile demand. But if it spares the realm... Ned felt every eye in the throne room on him. The humiliation Tywin demanded was not just personal. It was a direct statement that House Stark was beneath House Lannister. Worse, the hostage requirement meant giving up someone dear, quite possibly one of his children, to dwell at Casterly Rock for 2 years as a pledge of good behavior. Every instinct in him rebelled at that. Yet Robert's pained expression showed how close the realm was to the precipice. Ned's voice came slow, deliberate. I cannot speak for a decision of such magnitude without thought, your grace. Cersei sniffed. Time is a luxury. My father moves closer to the trident with every passing day. Robert ground his teeth. The realm is not Tywin's to bully, but if we refuse outright, we'll have a war on our hands. Ned, talk to me privately. I'll not make you kneel, but we must weigh all options. He beckoned Ned forward. The messenger remained kneeling while Robert and Ned withdrew from the dais, stepping behind a column. Behind them, the court murmured. Cersei stayed near the throne, no doubt wishing she could overhear. Robert glared at the polished stone pillar. Damn that old lion. He grows bolder by the day. What do we do, Ned? If you kneel to him, I look weak. If we refuse, we risk the entire realm's peace. I'd be more inclined to war if I thought the realm would stand behind me. But the Tyrells might stay neutral, the Vale might sit on its high perch, and the Greyjoys, let's not speak of them. We could be outnumbered. Ned, hands clasped behind his back, struggled to keep his voice calm. Your grace, I see no easy path, but Tywin's demand for a public kneeling is a declaration that he, not you, holds the real power. I suspect he hopes to humiliate me in order to glorify House Lannister. The hostage demand is worse. We cannot yield a Stark to their control. My son Robb is in Winterfell. He won't abide that, nor can I imagine giving them Sansa or Arya. That thought alone turns my stomach. Robert let out a long breath. Then we say no. Let Tywin come if he dares, and we'll put him down. I'll rally every loyal banner I have. The Stormlands will ride for me, I'm sure. The Riverlords will fight for their own land if Tywin crosses their borders. Possibly we can convince the Tyrells to join, but we must do it fast, or Tywin will smash Riverrun before we can muster. A sense of inevitability and dread coursed through Ned. We can try. War is the path we are on, unless Tywin lowers his demands. I cannot kneel to him, not like this. Robert clapped Ned's shoulder, half in comfort, half in desperation. We'll plan for war, then, and see if Tywin backs down. Gods help us all. He turned back to the throne, posture rigid. Send that messenger away. He can tell Tywin will not accept his demands, but we remain open to reason. If he chooses war, so be it. Ned bowed. Yes, your grace. They returned to the dais. Robert, still bristling with anger, declared the audience ended. The Lannister messenger was dismissed with orders to inform Tywin that the crown found his demands unacceptable but remained willing to talk further. The man stammered his acknowledgments and beat a hasty retreat, escorted by gold cloaks. Cersei watched with an enigmatic smile, offering no overt comment in Robert's presence. Ned, however, could feel her triumph. She likely believed this refusal would escalate the conflict, thereby delivering Ned to ruin. In her eyes, if Tywin's host battered the Riverlands, the blame would fall on House Stark for not groveling. Perhaps that was exactly what Tywin wanted. Ned left the throne room, posture stiff. Outside, in the courtyard, chaos reigned as retainers and knights argued among themselves, already preparing for the possibility of open war. Ned felt a coldness settle in his heart. He had done everything short of perjury and abject surrender. If Tywin refused to relent, blood would flow soon enough. That night, Ned paced his chambers, too restless for bed. Sansa and Arya hovered, sensing his tension. At last, he summoned Jory Castle's cousin, Tomard, a guard he trusted, and asked him to gather men discreetly, to be ready for any threat. The North had a few loyal guards still in the city, though half had died or returned home after Jaime's initial ambush. Ned needed every sword. He considered writing another letter to Robb, urging him to prepare the North for war, but hesitated. He had already sent one telling Robb to keep watch. Another urging him to gather an army might provoke Tywin further. But if war was inevitable, the North must be ready. Ultimately, Ned decided to pen a carefully worded missive. War may come. Summon loyal bannermen to Winterfell, but do not march south until my word or until the Tullus are directly threatened. He sealed it, sending it to Pycelle's rookery. Morning came with oppressive heat and no good news. Guards patrolled the battlements, as though expecting Tywin's host to appear outside the walls at any moment. The king withdrew to the yard for practice with the master-at-arms, hoping to sweat out his frustrations with a sword. Cersei locked herself in her apartments. Varys, Baelish, and Pycelle convened a small council that Ned was not invited to, though he heard rumors afterward that it accomplished nothing. Late that afternoon, Ned was summoned again to Robert's presence. The king had been drinking, judging by the flush in his cheeks. He paced a small antechamber off the great hall, fists clenched, while Barristan Selmy and Renly Baratheon looked on with trepidation. Ned inclined his head. "Your Grace, what news?" Robert gestured angrily to a torn piece of parchment on the table. "A raven arrived not an hour ago. Tywin marches. The scouts say he's crossed the Red Fork of the Trident, setting fires along the way. It's begun." His fist struck the table. "He's done with words." Renly looked grim. "That means he's likely heading for Riverrun, or close by. The Tully bannermen have assembled, but they might not be enough. They need your leadership, Robert, or they'll be overwhelmed." Ned's mind raced. So Tywin had chosen war instead of further parley. "We must get word to Lord Hoster Tully that the crown stands with him. If Tywin assaults them, we'll respond in force. But we need an army, fast." Robert's eyes blazed. "And we'll have one. I'll send ravens to the Stormlords, the Crownlands, the Vale if Lisa can be coaxed, the Reach if Mace Tyrell can be swayed. We'll muster here in the city, then march. Gods, I hate war, but Tywin's forced my hand." Selmy shifted. "Your Grace, you'll lead the host yourself?" "Damn right I will," Robert snapped. "I won't cower behind the walls. I'm still the same man who crushed Rhaegar Targaryen. I'll show Tywin who the true king is." Then he turned to Ned. "I want you at my side, Ned. You know the Riverlands, you've fought across these lands before. I need your counsel." Ned hesitated. "I am at your service. But if I leave King's Landing, who will look after my daughters?" Renly interjected. "We can keep them here under guard, or perhaps send them to the Vale for safety. But leaving them in the capital might be risky. The Lannisters have many friends here." Ned's heart pounded. The idea of riding to war in the Riverlands while Sansa and Arya remained in King's Landing, surrounded by Lannister influence, unsettled him deeply. But taking them along to a war camp was equally unthinkable. "I must think on it," he said softly. "But I will go if you command." Robert nodded. "I do command it. The realm needs you, no matter the bad blood with the Lannisters. I'm naming you Warden of the East while Jon Arryn's son is still a child. That should give you authority to call upon lords in the Vale, if that helps." Ned bowed stiffly. "Thank you, Your Grace." Inwardly, he felt the weight of yet another duty pressing down. Warden of the East. A sudden responsibility to rally Vale lords who might not even answer to him. Lisa had grown so distant, so erratic. But perhaps it was better than letting the veil remain on the sidelines. Renly said, "I'll handle the logistics of gathering provisions here. The gold cloaks must maintain order, especially if you're gone. Robert, if the city riots, we'll have chaos at home while we fight a war abroad." Robert clapped his brother on the shoulder. "You're good at counting casks of wine and bushels of grain, Renly. Do that and get us everything we need. The realm rides to war, and we'll need to feed thousands." He turned to Selmy, eyes narrowing. "Gather the Kingsguard. All but 1 or 2 can accompany me. I'll choose who remains behind to guard my heir. Joffrey will remain here." He spat the words, as if annoyed by the notion of leaving the boy behind. "Cersei won't like it, but I can't have the boy in a war camp. He's too young, though I'm sure he'd crow about wanting to kill Starks." Ned said nothing, but the jab at Joffrey's brash nature did not escape him. Robert bellowed for wine, draining a cup before continuing. "We'll march within a fortnight if we can gather enough men quickly. Tywin's crossing the Trident, so we can't wait. Ned, see to your affairs. Decide what to do with your daughters. Just be ready." Ned murmured agreement, and Robert dismissed them. Selmy left at once, while Renly gave Ned a sympathetic look before following. Ned lingered a moment, glancing at the remnants of the parchment on the table. It seemed a messenger from Hoster Tully had scrawled desperate pleas for aid as Tywin approached. War was now certain. He left the antechamber, mind swirling. In the corridor, he nearly collided with Cersei, who must have been hovering nearby. She made no pretense of courtesy this time. "So Robert marches off to war and you go with him," she said, voice low. "You truly think you'll best my father on the battlefield, Stark? Perhaps the Trident will run red with wolf's blood." Ned's spine stiffened. "We do what we must to protect the realm from your father's ambition. Perhaps you should counsel him to withdraw before more blood is spilled." A ghost of a laugh escaped her. "He won't withdraw. He wants your house humbled, your blood repaid for Jaime's. If you stand in his way, you'll meet the fate you've courted since the day you cut my brother down in that street." She took a step closer, eyes flashing. "All your talk of peace and you end here marching to war. A fitting irony." Ned refused to be baited. "Think on what war truly means, Your Grace. You will not be spared its consequences. If Tywin fails, House Lannister may lose more than a single son. If Tywin succeeds, the realm may endure more chaos than you can imagine. No one is safe." She studied him, lips parted as if to retort, but words did not come. Her mask of cold confidence faltered for a heartbeat. Then she turned on her heel and strode away, leaving Ned to wonder if even Cersei felt a flicker of fear at the monstrous forces now unleashed. He made his way back to the Tower of the Hand, heart heavy with the knowledge that soon he would depart for the Riverlands in Robert's host. Where would that leave Arya and Sansa? He thought of sending them to Winterfell, but the roads might be dangerous with Lannister outriders. The Vale was closer, but Lisa's cooperation was not guaranteed, and the mountain passes were treacherous. Keeping them in King's Landing carried its own risks, especially if the city descended into unrest. When he reached his chambers, he found his daughters waiting anxiously. Sansa still wore a hopeful expression, as if any news might be good. Arya looked grim. Ned sat them down, explaining gently what was happening. Sansa trembled at the mention of war, tears shining in her eyes. Arya's face hardened with determination. "You can't leave us behind," Arya insisted. "Let me fight at your side." Ned stroked her hair. "You are too young, little one. Even if you were grown, I would not relish sending you into battle. War is not a game." Sansa asked in a quavering voice, "What will become of us?" Ned tried to sound reassuring. "I will find a safe place for you both. If the city remains calm under Lord Renly's administration, you can stay here with a guard of loyal men. Or I might send you to the Vale, but I cannot decide rashly. War times are uncertain. I only ask for your trust, that I will do my best to protect you." Arya opened her mouth to protest, but seeing the worry in her father's eyes, she fell silent. Sansa wiped at her tears, managing a nod. In the following days, the keep bustled with the preparations for war. Smiths labored night and day, forging swords and fitting armor. Merchants arrived at the gates, hawking provisions at inflated prices. Courtiers either rushed to find reasons to depart the city or tried to stay close to the king, hoping for favor. Robert himself roamed the castle yards, examining wagons, meeting with knights, feasting rowdily at night to keep his spirits high. Ned made lists of the men-at-arms loyal to the crown, searching for holes in their muster. Renly frantically negotiated supply lines. Pycelle oversaw the ravens, dispatching calls to bannermen across the Crownlands and Stormlands. And so the juggernaut of conflict rumbled forward. Each day, more men arrived, swelling the city's barracks until they overflowed. Streets choked with sellswords looking for contracts. The price of bread rose sharply. Fear stirred the hearts of small folk, who remembered the horrors of the sack of kings landing at the end of Robert's rebellion. If Tywin Lannister's armies came here again, what might happen? At last, the day came when Robert declared his host ready to march. It was a grand, chaotic spectacle in the scorching sun outside the city walls. Thousands of men assembled in rough ranks. Knights on horseback resplendent in polished plate, lesser lords with their banners rippling, foot soldiers carrying spears, archers with quivers at their hips. The gold cloaks who would remain behind manned the walls, saluting the king as he rode by. Trumpets brayed, and the clank of metal mingled with the low hum of the restless throng. Ned wore his old campaign armor, well-polished but bearing scratches from past battles. He kept his face grim, ignoring the pageantry. Sansa stood on the parapet overlooking the gathering, tears glistening as she watched her father mount his horse. Arya was beside her, expression forlorn. Ned had arranged for them to remain in the Red Keep under Lord Renly's supervision, with a sworn band of loyal men to guard them. It was the best he could manage. He prayed the city would stay stable. Robert sat astride a massive warhorse, wearing a magnificent breastplate inlaid with gold, though it strained against his girth. He glowered at the columns of men, gesturing for them to form up. Behind him, a royal standard-bearer flew the crowned stag of House Baratheon. At Robert's side was Barristan Selmy, the white cloak of the King's Guard trailing behind him in the dust. Other knights of note dotted the formation, and far back, baggage wagons stretched out, ready to follow. King Robert's booming voice cut through the sweltering air. Men of the Crownlands, Stormlands, and all loyal houses, we ride to defend the realm against treachery. Lord Tywin Lannister threatens our peace. We shall show him that the king's justice reigns supreme. A roar answered him, though some faces showed unease. Ned guided his horse forward. He felt the press of memory. They had gathered like this during Robert's rebellion, charging forth to topple the Targaryens. Now, ironically, they might face the father of the man who'd helped them win that war. Tywin Lannister had turned on the Mad King at the 11th hour, delivering the sack of King's Landing. The wheel of fate spun strangely. The gates of King's Landing swung open wide. Robert spurred his horse onward, brandishing a heavy warhammer. The host began to move. Hooves clattered on the paved road, the thunderous vibration echoing in Ned's bones. He looked up once, seeing Sansa and Arya, small figures on the walls. He raised a hand in farewell. He thought he saw Arya wave vigorously, while Sansa simply pressed a hand to her mouth. Then the tide of soldiers carried him forward, away from the city, into the open fields where the king's banners stretched like a sea of color. They would march north by northwest, aiming to cut off Tywin's route to Riverrun or meet him near the Trident if possible. Scouts had to be sent ahead, lines of supply protected. War was a swirl of details, each one critical. Ned immersed himself in it, trying not to dwell on the personal cost. Every step might lead them deeper into bloodshed that no carefully worded letter could prevent now. As the afternoon sun beat down, the royal host snaked its way across the rolling terrain, dust rising beneath thousands of boots and hooves. Ned rode near the front, consulting with Robert and Barristan about tactics. Behind them, outriders scouted for any sign of Lannister advance. The mood was tense but resolute. That evening, they made camp beside a small river. Tents rose in a sprawling mass. Men busied themselves watering horses, foraging for firewood, setting watch. Robert convened a brief war council, deciding on their route for the next day. Then he retired to a large pavilion, likely to drink and brood. Ned oversaw the arrangement of the guard shifts, ensuring that no Lannister force could take them by surprise in the night. The Riverlands lay a week's march away, and Tywin might already have engaged the Tullus. At his own smaller tent, Ned removed his armor and washed his face in a basin of cool water. His squire, a lad of 17 named Perry, busied himself checking mail links and buckles for any wear. Ned's body ached from the day's ride, but his mind refused to rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Red Keep walls, with Sansa's tearful face and Arya's determined scowl. A presence at the tent flap caught his attention. It was Barristan Selmy, stepping inside with quiet courtesy. The old knight's eyes reflected the torchlight. "Lord Stark, might I speak with you a moment?" Ned nodded wearily, gesturing for him to sit on a camp stool. Perry excused himself, taking the armor outside to polish. Barristan removed his white helm, setting it aside. He looked older than Ned recalled from the rebellion days, lines etched by years of service. He cleared his throat. "I served your father once, albeit briefly, during the War of the Nine Penny Kings. He was an honorable man." Ned nodded. "I've heard you were at his side in a few skirmishes. He spoke well of your skill." A faint smile ghosted Selmy's lips. "He was gracious. Now I serve his son, in a manner of speaking. Your father kept the king's peace in the north. We now ride to keep it in the Riverlands. Do you believe we can still avoid a larger conflict?"